A wealthy man is left speechless when a young boy performs a song penned by his long-lost wife. A decade has passed, but when he spots the unique necklace adorning the boy's neck, he's utterly shaken. Before we delve into the tale, leave a comment below and share where you're tuning in from. Liam Carter sat at the head of the table, his sharp eyes scanning the room like a ruler overseeing his kingdom. Across from him sat a group of eager investors, men desperate for a slice of the empire he had painstakingly built from scratch. The restaurant's soft golden lighting bounced off the polished glass table, casting flickering shadows over the faces of those seated before him. A scene meticulously crafted to radiate power, wealth, and control. Liam tapped his fingers lightly against the crystal surface in a deliberate rhythm. Numbers were tossed around, contract dissected, strategies debated. Another round of high-stakes chess. And as always, he held all the winning cards. Then it happened. A melody floated through the air, soft yet piercing, weaving through the chatter like a ghost from another life. At first, it barely registered, a faint note lost in the background of clinking glasses and murmured deals. But then a voice joined the melody, delicate yet unmistakably familiar. Liam froze, his fingers tightening around the stem of his glass as the song unlocked something deep within him, something buried beneath years of silence. It couldn't be. "Do you remember this song, Liam?" She had asked him once, her voice tinged with amusement as she stirred a cup of hot cocoa in their modest Chicago apartment. Emily had always hummed that tune while cooking, barefoot on the hardwood floor, her oversized apron hanging loosely from her petite frame. He used to tease her about singing off-key, and she'd shoot him a playful glare before flicking water at him. "Remember? This is our song." Liam set his wine glass down with a quiet thud and pushed back his chair. The investors exchanged puzzled glances, but he ignored them. The entire negotiation, the millions on the line, the strategic partnerships, all of it faded into insignificance. "I need a moment," he said, his tone clipped and firm, leaving no room for argument. He turned away from the table without another word, striding past rows of polished silverware and immaculately arranged plates. He barely noticed the waitstaff bustling around him, his focus singular and unwavering. The song still played. Through the towering glass doors of Le Chateau, past the velvet-lined booths and the muted hum of privileged conversations, Liam stepped into the crisp night air. New York buzzed around him, bright neon lights reflecting off rain-slicked pavement, the city's rhythm undeterred by his unraveling. And then he saw them. A small group of street musicians had gathered just beyond the restaurant's terrace, a pianist, a guitarist, and, standing at the center, a boy. Liam came to an abrupt halt. The child, no older than 9 or 10, gripped the microphone with surprising confidence, singing with a raw sincerity that seemed too profound for his age. The song poured from him effortlessly, his voice carrying something hauntingly familiar. But it wasn't just the song. It was the silver chain around the boy's neck. A cold, sharp pressure settled in Liam's chest. The pendant gleamed under the city lights, catching the movement of the boy's small frame. It was a simple design, unremarkable to most. But to Liam it was anything but. He knew that necklace. His breath turned shallow as he stepped forward, his body moving on instinct. The street performance ended, and a small crowd clapped politely before dispersing. The boy gave a slight bow, tucking the microphone under his arm. As he did, the pendant shifted again, catching the light once more. Liam clenched his fists. He had designed that necklace. For Emily. Everything around him. The city, the passing cars, the distant laughter of strangers, blurred into nothing. Liam focused on only one thing, the child before him. The boy finally noticed him staring, his expression shifting from curiosity to wary caution. He was used to people stopping to listen to their music, but there was something about this man's intensity that made him hesitate. Liam took another step forward, keeping his voice steady even as his pulse roared in his ears. "The song," he said, his tone unreadable. "Where'd you learn it?" The boy hesitated, glancing briefly at his bandmates before returning his gaze to Liam. "My mom taught it to me," he answered simply. Liam's world tilted. He exhaled sharply, struggling to process the words. "Your mom," he repeated, almost as if testing the weight of them. "What's her name?" The boy studied him for a second before answering. Clara. Something inside Liam snapped. His mind rebelled against the name, against the impossible reality it suggested. Emily had vanished without a trace. No clues, no explanations, no leads. And yet, here stood this boy, singing her song, wearing her pendant, carrying a piece of her as if she had never truly been gone. Liam took another step closer, forcing his breath to steady. That necklace, he said, his voice quieter now. Where did you get it? The boy's fingers instinctively wrapped around the pendant, gripping it protectively. It was my mom's, he said, his eyes flickering with something unreadable. She gave it to me when I turned 5. Liam inhaled sharply. 5 years ago. His mind raced, calculating the timeline. If this boy was 9, and Emily had disappeared 10 years ago. He swallowed hard, his voice barely above a whisper. Your mom, he started carefully. Was she always called Clara? The boy frowned, his expression shifting slightly. Of course, he said, his voice laced with uncertainty now. Liam shook his head. She wasn't, he murmured, moored himself into the child. His entire body felt electrified with the realization that had begun to take shape. He had spent 10 years chasing ghosts. Now he was standing right in front of one. Liam didn't push. He knew better than to demand, especially from a child who had no reason to trust him. Instead, he softened his voice, keeping his tone calm and even. May I meet your mother? The boy hesitated, his fingers curling around the strap of his worn-out backpack. His instincts told him to be cautious. His mother had always warned him about strangers. But there was something different about this man. Something in his voice didn't sound like a lie. Why? The boy asked, his eyes narrowing slightly. Liam exhaled slowly, aware that every word he said now mattered. I knew your mother a long time ago, he admitted. I've been searching for her. He let the weight of that statement settle before adding, I just want to see her, to know she's okay. The boy studied him for a moment longer, considering, finally, with the kind of measured carefulness only a child who had seen too much could possess. He nodded. Okay, he said, but you don't tell her I brought you. And if she asks, you're just an old friend. Liam swallowed hard, nodding in agreement. I promise. The boy led him through the winding streets of a part of New York Liam had never thought to step into before. It was far removed from the glass towers and polished luxury he was used to. Here, the sidewalks were cracked, the buildings aged and weary, graffiti stretching across brick walls like silent protests against time. He followed the boy through a narrow alleyway until they stopped in front of a run-down apartment complex. The exterior was faded. The metal railing leading up to the entrance rusted with years of neglect. Liam felt an odd sense of displacement as he stepped inside. The air smelled faintly of old wood and something slightly metallic, the hum of distant city life filtering through thin walls. The apartment was small, cramped, but meticulously kept. Everything was in its place, as if someone had worked tirelessly to maintain order in a life that had so little of it. The boy kicked off his shoes by the door, dropping his backpack onto couch. Liam stood in the center of the living room, absorbing everything. The mismatched furniture, the stack of unpaid bills on the counter, the faint traces of lavender in the air. It was foreign, yet something about it felt intimately familiar. His gaze landed on a small wooden table pushed against a far wall, where a single-framed photograph sat. His chest tightened. He crossed the room without thinking, his fingers ghosting over the edges of the frame. In the photo, the boy stood beside a woman with dark hair tied in a loose ponytail, dressed in a simple blouse, her arm draped around the boy's shoulders. Liam's breath caught. His fingers trembled slightly as he lifted the frame, his heart pounding so loudly it drowned out everything else. It was her. Her hair was shorter now, framing her face differently than he remembered, but the curve of her lips, the depth in her eyes, those were the same. Yet there was something distant in her gaze, something missing, like an echo of someone who had been lost and remade into someone else. The doorknob twisted behind him, the sound of keys jangling breaking the silence. The front door creaked open, and for the first time in 10 years, he saw her. She stepped inside, setting down a bag of groceries before pausing, her body stiffening as she noticed him. Her eyes met his, dark and guarded. There was no flicker of recognition, no shift in expression, only quiet suspicion. "Who are you?" Her voice was sharp, defensive, nothing like the warm, playful tone he remembered. Liam felt frozen in place. 1,000 words fought to escape, but none made it past his throat. He had imagined this moment for years. He had thought of what he would say, how he would tell her how much he had searched, how he had never stopped believing she was out there somewhere. But now, standing in front of her, none of it mattered. She didn't know him. He tried to find the right words, but everything sounded hollow in his head. "Ethan, who is this?" she asked, turning to the boy. Ethan hesitated. "Air," he said. "He's an old friend." Her gaze flickered back to Liam, more skeptical now. "An old friend." She scoffed slightly. "I think you had the wrong person." He took a slow step forward, his throat tight. "Emily." Her expression didn't change. If anything, she looked even more wary. "I think you have the wrong person," she said carefully. "My name is Clara." Liam felt the world tilt, but he refused to accept it. "No," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. "Your name is Emily Carter. We were engaged. 10 years ago, you disappeared. I've been looking for you ever since." Something flickered in her eyes, a shadow of something deep within her, but it disappeared just as quickly as it came. She shook her head, stepping further inside, putting distance between them. "I don't know what you're talking about." Liam reached into his pocket, pulling out the old photograph, the one he had carried for a decade, the one that had begun to fray at the edges from too many nights spent looking at it. He placed it on the table before her. Then he reached into his other pocket and produced a small velvet box. He flipped it open, revealing a ring, a simple but elegant band, with a single diamond set in the center, her engagement ring. Clara stared at it, her expression unreadable. Slowly, hesitantly, she reached out, her fingers barely brushing against the photograph. She stared at it, her eyes scanning over the image, taking in the woman who looked like her, but whom she refused to acknowledge. Her breath hitched, and then she flinched, bringing a hand to her temple as a sharp pain shot through her skull. A flash, a white dress, warm fingers intertwining with hers, a voice whispering her name. The memory was there, just beyond reach. Liam took a step closer, his voice gentle but firm. "You do remember, don't you?" She inhaled sharply, squeezing her eyes shut. The pain in her head throbbed harder, but the memories, they were fragmented, like shattered glass she couldn't piece together. Finally, she opened her eyes, her expression unreadable once more. "I don't know you." Liam's breath shuddered out. He had braced himself for many possibilities, but hearing her say those words cut deeper than he had anticipated. She took a step back, her hands balling into fists at her sides. "I think you should leave." Liam didn't move right away. He stood there, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on him. He wanted to fight it, wanted to make her see, but he also knew now wasn't the time. His jaw tightened, his fingers flexing at his sides. Then finally, he exhaled and nodded. "Okay." He turned toward the door, pausing just long enough to glance back at her one last time. His voice was quiet, but unwavering when he spoke. "I'm sorry," he said, and with that, he walked away. But deep in his chest, Liam knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Liam didn't give up. As soon as he stepped out of the apartment, his fingers tightened around his phone, his mind working faster than his pulse. His thumb swiped across the screen, dialing a number he had memorized years ago. The line barely rang twice before a voice answered. "Liam," the gruff voice greeted, laced with knowing amusement. "I assume you need me for something?" Liam didn't waste time. "I need you to reopen the case on Emily Carter." His voice was sharp, unwavering. A brief pause and a sigh. "It's been a decade, Liam." "Why now?" "Because I found her." Silence stretched on the other end before Marcus Lane, his trusted investigator, finally responded, his tone shifting into something more serious. "Where?" "She's in New York," Liam said, "but she doesn't remember me. She doesn't remember anything. I need to know why she disappeared. who took her, and what the hell happened to her all these years. Marcus exhaled through the receiver. All right, I'll dig into it. It won't be easy. 10 years is a long time for a trail to go cold. But I'll find something. Give me a few days. Find the truth, Liam said simply, at any cost. The call ended, but Liam's mind raced. He couldn't shake the way Emily, Clara, had looked at him with such unfamiliarity, as if the years they had spent together had been wiped clean. He wouldn't let it end like this. For days later, Marcus Lane walked into Liam's office, his movements deliberate, his face shadowed with exhaustion. He dropped a thick manila folder onto the sleek mahogany desk. This, he said, rubbing the back of his neck, wasn't easy to dig up. Some of these records were buried deep, almost like someone didn't want them found. Liam's jaw tightened as he reached for the file, flipping it open. The first thing that caught his eye was a hospital record dated exactly 10 years ago. A blurry, grainy photo attached to the document made his stomach twist. It was Emily, or rather, it was Clara. Liam scanned the report, his pulse pounding harder with every word. Patient admitted, unidentified woman, found unconscious on the side of a road in New York. No identificación. No known history. Memory loss suspected. Amnesia confirmed. 2 months pregnant. Temporary name assigned, Clara. His breath grew shallow. Someone had found her. Someone had brought her to this hospital. She was pregnant. Ethan was his son. But why had no one contacted him? Why had no missing person reports led here? His fingers tightened around the pages as he flipped through more documents until his eyes landed on a name that made his blood run cold. Dr. Lewis Montgomery. Liam didn't need Marcus to explain. The name was too familiar. Montgomery was a specialist, notorious for working on experimental cognitive suppression therapy. Essentially, memory erasure. Liam looked up, his gaze dark. He did this to her. Marcus nodded grimly. It looks like someone didn't want Emily to remember who she was, and they succeeded for 10 years. Liam clenched his fists. Who paid him? That's the part one couldn't uncover yet, Marcus admitted. Medical records are tricky, but I found something else. He pulled another sheet from a folder and laid it in front of Liam. A police report from the same night Emily was found. Liam's breath caught as he scanned the document. A woman matching Emily's description had been seen near an abandoned warehouse before collapsing. Witnesses reported she looked disoriented, as if she had just escaped from somewhere. His stomach churned. Emily hadn't just gotten lost that night. She had been running. From what? Or worse, who? Marcus leaned forward. Someone had her, Liam, and for some reason they didn't kill her. They erased her. Someone wanted her alive, but completely removed from her past. Liam's grip on the file tightened. He had spent 10 years mourning the absence of Emily. But now, he realized the truth was far worse. She had never left him. She had been taken, and someone had made sure she'd never find her way back. Liam exhaled slowly, setting the documents down with controlled precision. Montgomery, he said. He's the key. Marcus nodded. I'll track him down. If he's still alive, we'll make him talk. Liam's eyes darkened. Not if he talks. When... The moment Marcus tracked down Montgomery's whereabouts, Liam moved. There was no room for patience. Not when he was as close to uncovering the truth. The address led them to a rundown building on the outskirts of Brooklyn, a far cry from the sterile, high-end medical offices Montgomery had once operated in. The walls were cracked, the neon sign of a cheap motel flickering intermittently above the entrance. It was a kind of place where people went to disappear, to bury their sins beneath layers of secrecy and dust. Liam pushed through the door, Marcus close behind. The man at the front desk barely looked up, too accustomed to transient guests who didn't want to be remembered. They climbed the stairs, the wooden steps creaking beneath their weight, until they reached room 214. Marcus knocked. Silence. Then a shuffle from inside. Liam exchanged a glance with Marcus before stepping back and delivering a swift, forceful kick to the door. The lock snapped, and the door swung open violently, revealing a dimly lit room with overturned furniture and a man frozen in the corner, eyes wide with fear. Dr. Lewis Montgomery. His once pristine suit was wrinkled, his face pale and gaunt, a shadow of the respected neurologist he had once been. His hands trembled as he raised them in surrender, his voice weak. "Please, I don't know what you want." Liam stepped forward, his presence commanding, suffocating. His voice was low, but laced with ice. "You know exactly what I want." Montgomery swallowed hard, his gaze darting to Marcus, then back to Liam. "I don't do that kind of work anymore." Liam grabbed the front of the man's shirt, yanking him forward until their faces were inches apart. "What did you do to Emily Carter?" The name alone drained the color from Montgomery's face. He shook his head rapidly. "I don't." Liam shoved him backward, causing Montgomery to stumble against the dresser. "Don't lie to me." Marcus, leaning against the doorframe, exhaled impatiently. "Look, Doc, we both know you don't have the backbone for a long interrogation. So let's make this easy. Tell us who paid you to erase her memory, and maybe you walk away from this in one piece." Montgomery's breath came in quick, uneven bursts. He wrung his hands together, his shoulders shaking as though the very walls were closing in on him. Finally, he whispered, "She paid me." Liam's jaw clenched. "Who?" Montgomery's lips trembled. "Cassandra," he said, barely more than a breath. "Your sister." For a moment, the room felt eerily silent. Liam's heartbeat slowed, the weight of the words pressing down on him like an unbearable force. "No," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. Montgomery swallowed, shaking his head. "She came to me, paid me an obscene amount of money. She wanted her gone, but not dead, just erased." His hand shook violently. "I followed orders. I developed a cocktail, an experimental treatment. It suppressed memories, severed neural pathways. It was designed to be irreversible." Liam took a step back, his body rigid. Cassandra, his own sister. The realization slammed into him like a freight train. His mind raced, trying to reconcile the truth with the woman he had trusted, the sibling who had stood by him through everything. Except, clearly, this... Montgomery must have seen the shift in Liam's expression because he kept talking, words tumbling out in desperation. "I had no choice. She had power, money. I couldn't say no. And I thought..." He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "I thought it was just another affair gone wrong. I didn't ask questions. I didn't know she was engaged to you." Liam's blood ran cold. Cassandra hadn't just wanted Emily gone. She had wanted Emily wiped from existence, forced into a life where she would never remember him, never reclaim what had been stolen. Liam's hands curled into fists. "Where is she now?" Montgomery flinched. "I don't know." She covered her tracks. "But..." He inhaled shakily, eyes darting toward the drawer beside the bed. "I kept some records. I kept insurance." Marcus moved before Montgomery could second-guess himself, yanking the drawer open and pulling out a worn leather folder. He handed it to Liam, who flipped it open with precision. Inside were medical records, payments, bank transfers signed in Cassandra's name. There was even a document detailing the specifics of the procedure. Notes scribbled in Montgomery's messy handwriting. And at the bottom, a note scrawled in the margin, asterisk, ensure she never remembers. If she does, make sure she doesn't live long enough to fix it. Asterisk. Liam's breath came slow and deep, but his fury burned white-hot. Montgomery shrank under his glare. I swear, I never had anything to do with that part. She never came back to me. I assumed she was just living her new life." Liam slammed the folder shut. "Then you're lucky." Montgomery swallowed, nodding furiously. "I helped her once, but I won't do it again. Please, you have to believe me." Liam stepped back, his mind already 3 steps ahead. His sister had betrayed him in the worst way possible. And now she was still out there, waiting for the day Emily might remember. And if that day ever came, Cassandra would make sure Emily didn't survive it. Liam turned to Marcus. "Find her." Marcus nodded. "On it." Liam took one last look at Montgomery, at the pathetic, shaking man who had stolen 10 years from the woman he loved. Then, without another word, he turned and walked out. Because now, there was only one thing left to do. Liam stood at the threshold of Clara's small apartment once again, But this time he wasn't leaving without answers. He held a folder in his hand, filled with every piece of evidence Marcus had unearthed. The hospital records, the police reports, the payments linking Cassandra to Montgomery. Proof of a life that had been stolen. Proof that Clara wasn't Clara. She was Emily Carter. Clara sat on the worn-out couch, her body tense as she watched him place the folder on the coffee table, her hands curled in her lap, fingers gripping her own skin, as though bracing for impact. Liam exhaled slowly. I know this is overwhelming, but I need you to see this, to know the truth. She didn't respond immediately. Her gaze flickered to the folder, then to him, then back again. There was uncertainty in her eyes, but not outright rejection. That was progress. Liam flipped open the folder, carefully laying out each piece of evidence. He pointed to the hospital records. You were found unconscious 10 years ago. No ID, no memory. They named you Clara because of a torn slip of paper in your pocket. He flipped to another document. This is a report from the night you were found. Witnesses saw you near an abandoned warehouse before you collapsed. He pulled out the medical files. Montgomery. He performed a procedure to erase your memory. Clara inhaled sharply, her fingers twitching at her sides. She leaned forward slightly, scanning the pages, but her eyes weren't just reading. They were searching. Then Liam said it, softly. You are Emily Carter. You were 2 months pregnant before you lost your memory, and Ethan is our son. The name hung between them, thick with the weight of history. Clara's breath hitched. She swallowed, pressing her fingers to her temples, as though something inside her was fighting to surface. I don't remember. Liam nodded. Not yet, but I think you do feel it. He watched her closely. Every time I say my name, every time I stand in front of you, I see it in your eyes. That flicker of recognition. You may not remember, but some part of you knows me. She squeezed her eyes shut, shaking her head slightly. It doesn't make sense. Why would someone do this to me? Why would your sister? The moment the words left her lips, she froze. A sharp pain shot through her skull. She let out a small gasp, gripping the side of her head as fragmented images flickered through her mind. A wedding dress, a whisper of her name, a woman with cold, calculating eyes. Emily clutched the fabric of her gown, fear pounding in her chest as Cassandra stepped closer, her voice dangerously soft. You were never meant to be part of this family. A rush of memories pushed against the walls of her consciousness, memories that had been buried for a decade. She sucked in a sharp breath, her heart racing. Liam moved closer, his voice steady but urgent. Come with me. Let me help you get those memories back. If, after remembering, you decide you don't want to be that person again, I won't stop you. But don't you deserve to know the truth? Clara's chest rose and fell unevenly. She was afraid. But beneath the fear, there was something else, a need to understand, to know. She met his gaze. What do I have to do? You'll undergo therapy to regain your memory. If you want, I'll take you. Right now, Liam said. I'll try, Emily replied, her tone uncertain. Montgomery's hand shook as he prepared the treatment. He had no choice. Not after everything Liam had uncovered. Not with Marcus standing by the door, making it clear that there was no room for negotiation. Emily, Clara, sat in the reclining chair, gripping the armrests tightly. Liam sat beside her, his presence unwavering. This will bring back what was lost, Montgomery muttered. But the process isn't gentle. Liam reached for her hand. She let him. Montgomery activated the device, a low hum filling the room. Electrodes attached to Emily's temple sent faint pulses through her brain, stirring the memories buried deep inside. The first flash was sudden. A garden, sunlight filtering through the leaves. Liam laughing, reaching for her hand. Then another, a diamond ring. A whispered, yes. A kiss that tasted like forever. Tears slipped down her temples as the images grew sharper, faster. The day she was taken, hands grabbing her, a needle piercing her skin. Cassandra's voice in the distance, cold and detached. Make sure she forgets everything. The memories crashed into her, breaking through the barriers that held them at bay for so long. The pain was sharp, relentless, like reliving a decade of loss in mere seconds. Her body tensed, her breathing ragged, and then her eyes snapped open. She looked at Liam, not with confusion, not with fear, but with recognition. Tears welled in Emily's eyes as her chest rose and fell in uneven gasps. Liam didn't speak. He waited, giving her time to feel, to process. She reached out with trembling fingers, touching his face as if afraid he might disappear. "Liam," she whispered, her voice breaking. His breath hitched at the way she said his name, like she had found something she thought was lost forever. "You remember?" His voice was barely a whisper. She nodded slowly, her lips trembling. "I remember." She swallowed hard. "I remember her." Her expression hardened. "Cassandra, the betrayal, the years she stole from me." Liam gently squeezed her hand. "She took everything from you." Emily's gaze darkened. Not anymore. The past had stolen 10 years from her. Now she was ready to take them back. Meanwhile, Cassandra Reynolds sat in the dim glow of her penthouse office, her manicured fingers tapping rhythmically against the polished mahogany desk. 10 years. A full decade had passed, and not once had she ever considered the possibility of her past since catching up to her. She had buried them so deep, so irreversibly, that even she struggled to remember the full extent of her cruelty. To her, it had been necessary. Emily was never meant to belong in their world. Her phone buzzed, shattering the silence. She barely glanced at the caller ID before answering. "Speak." The voice on the other end was hurried, breathless. "Miss Reynolds, we have a problem." Cassandra's spine stiffened. "What kind of problem?" A pause. Then, the words that sent a chill down her spine. "She remembers." The blood drained from her face. Her grip on the phone tightened as the weight of those words settled in. "That's impossible," she whispered. She was wiped clean. The man hesitated before speaking again. "Montgomery failed. She got her memories back. Liam knows everything." For the first time in a decade, Cassandra felt fear coil in her stomach. She had spent years erasing Emily Carter, ensuring she was nothing more than a forgotten ghost. Now, that ghost was walking again, and she wasn't alone. Cassandra shot up from her chair. "We need to leave." Her most trusted man, Damien, had anticipated this. He had already set up an escape plan. A private yacht waiting at the docks, untraceable accounts, a new identity. She would disappear before anyone could touch her. What she didn't know was that Damien had already been bought by Liam. The abandoned dock loomed under the silver light of moon, the waves lapping against the wooden beams like a whispered omen. The yacht was there, sleek and waiting, a false promise of freedom. Cassandra's heels clicked against the concrete as she moved swiftly, Damien at her side. She had left everything behind, her life, her business, her fortune, her brother. All that mattered now was survival. Then she saw them. Standing beneath the flickering yellow light of the dock's lamppost were Liam and Emily. Her feet came to a dead stop. Liam's expression was unreadable, but there was an energy around him, a quiet storm before the inevitable destruction. Emily stood beside him, no longer the lost, broken woman Cassandra had tried to erase. Her stance was strong, her gaze sharp. A slow, knowing dread slithered through Cassandra's veins. This wasn't an escape. This was an ambush. Damien, the man she had trusted for years, took a step back, and that's when she knew she had been betrayed. Liam stepped forward, his voice cold as steel. "Going somewhere, Cassandra?" She schooled her features, forcing her usual arrogance back into place. "I don't know what ridiculous accusations you're about to throw at me, but I have no intention of listening." Emily tilted her head, studying Cassandra with a look that was almost pitying. "Almost." "No," she said softly. "Then you won't mind us playing something for you." Liam pulled out his phone and pressed play. A voice crackled through the silence. Cassandra's voice. Make sure she forgets everything. She was never supposed to be with him. She was a mistake. Erase her memory. And if she ever remembers, make sure she doesn't live long enough to fix it. The recording ended. Silence. Cassandra felt the ground tilt beneath her. "That's..." She let out a breathy laugh, shaking her head. That's manipulated. You said it. Liam cut her off. His voice was dangerously quiet. You ripped 10 years of my life away. 10 years of hers. His hands clenched at his sides, the rage beneath his composure simmering like a storm waiting to break. You did it for power, for control, because you couldn't stand the idea of someone loving me more than you. Emily took a step forward. You stole my life, she said, her voice laced with something deadly. But I remember now. Every single thing. Cassandra's chest rose and fell in rapid succession. She had to get out. She turned on her heel, about to bolt toward the yacht. Red and blue lights flashed across the dock. Sirens screamed through the night. Police cars skidded to a stop. The officers moved out in practice formation, their weapons raised. Cassandra Reynolds, a commanding voice boomed. You are under arrest for conspiracy, kidnapping, and attempted murder. Her entire world collapsed in slow motion. She turned back to Liam, to Emily. Liam simply stood there, watching, letting it happen. She let out a choked, breathless laugh, shaking her head. You set me up. Liam's expression was unreadable. No, Cassandra, you set yourself up. The officers grabbed her, forcing her wrist behind her back, slapping the cold steel of the handcuffs onto her skin. For the first time in her life, Cassandra felt powerless. As she was dragged away, she turned back one last time, her gaze locking onto Liam's. There was no remorse in his eyes, no hesitation, only finality and justice. Liam stood still as he watched the police car pull away, taking the woman who had once been his sister with it, a woman who had betrayed him in ways he still struggled to comprehend. Beside him, Emily let out a slow, unsteady breath. Her fingers curled slightly, her body tense with the weight of it all. It's over, Liam said quietly. She turned to him, her eyes searching his. Is it? He considered that. Would it ever truly be over? Could 10 years of stolen time, of broken hearts, ever be undone? Liam reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. Maybe not, he admitted. But this, he squeezed her fingers gently. This is where we start again. She exhaled a slow, deep breath that carried the weight of a decade. Then, for the first time in what felt like forever, she nodded. And beneath the flickering lamplight of an abandoned dock, amidst the echoes of a past they had finally put to rest, Liam and Emily took their first step forward. The days that followed Cassandra's arrest felt like stepping into a new world, one that was no longer clouded by the ghosts of the past. The weight that had burdened Liam and Emily for 10 years was finally lifting piece by piece. But the scars of the past remained, etched into their souls, reminders of everything they had lost and fought to reclaim. Tonight, however, there was no pain, no uncertainty, only love. The rooftop garden of Liam's penthouse overlooked the city skyline, the soft glow of string lights casting golden hues across the carefully arranged setting. The air was cool, carrying with it the faint scent of blooming jasmine. Emily stood near the edge, arms wrapped around herself, gazing at the endless cityscape before her. The woman who had once been Clara was gone. She was Emily Carter again, not just by name, but in spirit. She heard Liam's footsteps before she saw him. His presence was unmistakable, steady, grounding, and utterly hers. She turned as he approached, her breath hitching at the sight of him. The man who had never stopped searching for her, the man who had saved her, again and again. Liam didn't speak immediately. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He opened it, revealing the same engagement ring he had given her 10 years ago. Emily gasped, her fingers flying to her lips. "Liam," she whispered. He smiled, a rare, unrestrained smile. Then he dropped to one knee. "I lost you once," he said, voice thick with emotion. "And I swore if I ever found you again, I wouldn't waste another second. Emily, I have loved you in every lifetime. Before we met, after we were torn apart, and even when you didn't remember me." His eyes held hers, unwavering. "Marry me again. This time, nothing and no one will ever take you away from me." Emily's vision blurred with tears, not tears of pain or grief, but pure, unfiltered happiness. She nodded, barely able to speak. You found me. Her voice trembled. And we'll never let anyone take us away from each other again. As she whispered those words, she sank to her knees, throwing her arms around him. Liam wrapped her in his embrace, holding her like she was the most precious thing in the world. From the doorway, a small cheer erupted. Ethan, standing wide-eyed, bounced on his heels before racing toward them, laughing. "She said yes," he shouted, his excitement overflowing. "She said yes." Liam and Emily pulled apart, just enough to look at the boy as he flung himself at them, his small arms wrapping around their necks. "You're getting married," Ethan murmured, voice muffled against Liam's shoulder. "We're really going to be a family, right?" Liam felt a lump rise in his throat. He shifted, kneeling so he could meet Ethan's eyes. "We already are a family, kid," he said, his voice soft but firm. "And we always will be." Ethan grinned, hugging both of them even tighter. For the first time in years, Liam felt whole again. A week later, they stood beneath an archway of white roses, sunlight cascading around them as guests watched in quiet awe. The ceremony was small and intimate, not the grand affair that had once been planned. This time it was just about them. Emily, dressed in a simple yet elegant ivory gown, radiated happiness. Liam stood tall beside her, his hand never letting go of hers, as though to remind himself that she was real, that they had won. The officiant spoke, but Liam barely heard the words. His entire focus was on her, the woman he had fought for, the woman who had fought her way back to him. When it was time, he looked into her eyes and spoke his vows. "I've spent a decade dreaming of this moment," he said, voice steady but full of unspoken emotions. "There were days I thought I'd never find you again, but I did, and I promise, for as long as I breathe, I will never lose you again." Tears shimmered in Emily's eyes, but she smiled as she whispered her own promise. "No matter where life takes us, no matter how much time passes, I will always find my way back to you." The words felt like fate. The rings were exchanged. The world faded into a quiet hum. And then, finally, after 10 years, Liam kissed his wife again. Thunderous applause erupted. But it was Ethan's voice that rang out the loudest. The boy ran up to them as the ceremony ended, grabbing both their hands, his expression fierce with determination. He looked up at Liam, then Emily, his voice small but filled with a deep, innocent sincerity. "Dad," he whispered, "don't ever leave me and Mom again." Liam's breath caught. Slowly, he crouched down, bringing himself eye level with the boy. Then, without hesitation, he pulled him into his arms. "I won't," he murmured, his voice breaking just slightly. "Never again." Emily wrapped her arms around both of them, completing the family they had all been waiting for. And under the golden sunlight of a new beginning, they finally, truly belonged to each other. If this story touches your heart, leave your mark of the like, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel to explore more meaningful stories with us. Share your feelings with us, and tell us your own stories. Every word you share is a building block that helps create our strong and enduring community. Together, we'll create a warm space where everyone can share and connect. Finally, don't miss the incredible stories coming your way soon. We're always here to bring you the best selections, full of deep values, yet entertaining. See you there.